There are some books that inspire you to do better and reimagine what your days with your kids could look like. The Joy of Slow is one of those books. Welcome to Homeschool Yourself. I'm your host, Delina. I invite you to slow down and take in this conversation with Leslie Martino, author of The Joy of Slow. I hope this conversation helps you get a taste of what is in her book. It's a perfect guide to recenter and recalibrate your homeschool life. If you're heading into a new year or new school year, or even a new month, take a listen. Hi, Leslie. Welcome to Homeschool Yourself. I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. So let's just start off. Will you please just introduce yourself and tell me how and why, your book, The Joy of Slow, was important for you to write?
Yes, sure. Hi, Delina. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast, first of all. So, yes, I wrote a book called The Joy of Slow, Restoring Balance and Wonder to Homeschool Learning. And I think it was important for me to write maybe for a few different reasons. One of them being that the ideas in the book are things that I'm passionate about, things that I've been talking about and sharing about for a long time. And I felt like I was always able to talk about these ideas in fractured pieces, a little bit here, a little bit there. But I felt like writing a book gave me a way to put it all in a house and organize it for everybody. And so, this is actually how it lives in my brain. And, the pieces that you might have heard me talk about are parts of a whole picture. And so I felt like it was important for me to write it for those reasons. I also just I love writing. I've always loved writing, and I knew I was going to write a book. I've co-authored books, but not solo. And I just knew that it was something I was going to do again. And it just seemed really perfect to just in this, around this topic, something that I've been so passionate about.
I love it so much. I think it's the perfect book to start off, right before you start your
Mm.
school year, probably
Mhm.
right before you buy curriculum.
Yes.
But just right before you get started, just a reset. It's so grounding and it's so helpful in just knowing your why and why you want to do this and the feeling of how you want to do this homeschooling thing. So let's just start off with
Mhm.
explaining slow. What do you mean by slow?
Yeah. So I think slow means a few different things. And I think you can look at it in different contexts. Like if you look at it in the context of education or the way that we approach learning, I think that slow means adopting a meaningful practice of building deep roots more than wide roots. A lot of times in education, we're so concerned with how much can you know, but can we know something well? Can we know a few things
Yeah.
well? I think that for me is incorporated in the idea of slow. So whether you decide to use curriculum or whether you are letting learning unfold more naturally or learning about a passion or an interest, it's that valuing of deep understanding over just shallow mastery. So taking your time to do that and unfold learning in ways that are not about speed but about quality, really, over quantity. And because of that, idea of slow and how we approach learning, I think inherent in that is that you have a healthy respect for the process of building knowledge. I think a lot of times in education, we're so concerned with the end result and what you get and what you can show for your learning,
Mm-hmm.
but what's more important is the things that you've experienced along the process, the enlightenment, the disappointment, the struggle, the challenge, the wins, the highs, the lows. It's everything. It's all of it. The conversations, the mess ups, it's just like everything that goes into the process of learning something. And so it's about appreciating that process, stopping along the way in that process to reflect on what's happening, and to know that that is developing you more than you standing at the end of that process and saying, "Oh, look at all the things that I've
Yeah.
learned, I've gained."
Yeah. I think
Um,
a lot of us want that
mhm,
theoretically, but what
mhm,
are some of the things that get in the way of that
mhm.
when homeschooling?
Yeah. I think when we're homeschooling, we are so concerned that we're going to mess things up.
Mm,
We're so concerned that we're not going to give the children the right things, or that someone else is going to look at us and say that
mhm.
we are somehow not doing it right, or we are somehow not doing it in a way that serves the child well or is complete. There's so many voices, I think, that we are contending with. Like
Yes.
it's going on in our own minds, in our own heads. We think some of us have family members and outside voices looking at us and constantly criticizing, unfortunately. And there's There's the powers that be, depending on what state you live in,
Mhm.
the questions that you have to answer. What are you doing? What are you doing? So I think a lot of those things can get in the way and stand in the way. And what it boils down to is a lot of fear, and a lot of that fear is birthed out of a genuine place of love and concern, but it starts to look like control and it
Mm.
starts to get out of control. And then we end up not giving our children the things that we say we want to give them at the start.
Yeah.
And so I think part of slow is also our own level of reflection and our own willingness to step outside of the rat race a little bit and to look at ourselves and look at what we're doing and say, hang on, does what I'm doing at home with my children align with what I really value? Because it's not that you can't ever do anything else or can't do things that are, checking off someone else's boxes for whatever reasons. But if you're not doing more of the things that are meaningful to you and that align with your values, then why are we even doing those things?
Yeah.
So I think part of slow, that's part of it for us as parents,
Has it ever cost you anything to go at a
Mm,
different pace than the culture? Has it
mm,
cost you or your children, or
for
did
sure.
you think it was gonna cost you something and it was something different? Yeah.
Yeah, I think at times it's costed different things. When you choose to go against the grain in any
Mhm.
way, sometimes that costs really big things sometimes, like fractures in relationships or
Mm.
friendships. But those tend to be like, that really depends on the relationships and it depends on the issues. But sometimes it just costs you the sake of someone else. We always, we want to be comfortable, and we want to be looked at in a good light, and
Mhm.
we want for everybody to understand what we're doing,
Mm.
and we want for everyone to pat us on the back.
Yeah.
But that's not really reality. I think that when we are going against the grain, there are going to be people who look at what we're doing and say, that's weird, or that's crazy.
Or worse, like, you're messing up your kids. This is not real
Yes.
life, and you're not preparing them for real life.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And I think, when we can look at the opposite, like what will we gain from
Mhm.
doing this? What would it mean for my family if I did this? Then that's the leverage that we can use to do the things that are important.
Yeah.
Because when we are constantly looking at the other side, that's not going to get us what we really want. That's just going to keep us fearful. But we want to make those decisions that we're making to do the things that we believe are the right things for specific reasons. So we have to keep our eyes on what we'll gain from those
Yeah.
things. What would it mean for my family? What would it mean for our level of connection? What will I mean for my child's peace and sanity? What will it mean
Mm.
for my teenagers' level of anxiety? What will
Mm.
it mean for my, all of that, to adopt a slow pace in a world that's moving fast. Yeah, that's what we have to keep our eyes on.
Yeah. I was definitely gonna go to there, like, I wanna know what benefits your family has
Mhm.
received from this pace, but I
Mhm.
I want our listeners to know that it's not just gonna be, unicorns
Right.
and rainbows, and yeah, for sure. Um, so what are some ideas about learning and about
Mhm.
education that you think we need to let go of before taking this on?
I think
And
when it
taking
comes
the
to Yeah,
I'm
go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna
Uh-huh.
say taking this on sounds so aggressive, like the opposite of slow.
Right. No, but I do think that if you are going to adopt a slower pace, right, especially as it relates to learning and especially as it relates to education, then you do have to let go of some traditional conceptions of certain educational ideas, like progress.
Mm,
There is a very traditional idea of what it looks like to, for a child to be making progress. Usually that means that they are making that progress in lockstep with a bunch of other children who are the same age,
mhm,
learning the exact same material. But if we can allow ourselves to think of progress a little bit more broadly, progress, for if you think about it in your own life, progress often looks a little bit more like two steps forward, one step back. Sometimes um, it's not linear. sometimes it's more circular or zigzagged, or sometimes it includes more than just being able to do some rote academic task. Maybe you can learn to write and you can, in a span of a few years, and you can say, look at that, I have made progress in writing. But what about other kinds of progress, like self-determination, or the ability to be reflective, or to think about your own thinking, or to have a positive self-talk, or to organize your work? Or I just feel like you have to be willing to look at the development of a person, things like progress, or even just simple things like the scope and what a scope and sequence should be of a curriculum. Even those things are very often the traditional way of looking at these things are very narrow. So you can say, this is the material, this has to be learned. Once you learn it, which basically means you can pass a test and regurgitate the information, then you have made progress. And is that really what learning actually is? If you talk to different people working in different fields who have a system where they're like apprenticing under somebody, ask them if that's what it looks like. Usually this apprenticeship lasts for many hours, sometimes many years. Mastery of a subject is something that can honestly take a lifetime. Or you have people studying things for years and years and years and feel like they're still learning and still growing. So I just feel like we do kids a disservice when we make it so linear and we make it so defined like that. We have to actually able to be willing to let go of that a little bit, to say, we think that we have a responsibility to make all this learning occur within 18 years, when the reality is that, look at yourself as an adult. I'm still learning. I'm still growing. I'm still exploring ideas that I was exploring at 5. Seriously. And I'm like, that's not even exaggerating. So why, if I can let that go a little bit for my child, then that means I'm not going to be so worried about every little step that you're making.
Yeah.
If I'm going to be I'm going to notice more about the small little steps that you're making. And looking at how that, in the book, I describe it as like how your educational garden is growing over time, what it's yielding. I'm going to be looking for more growth than just the one little seedling or the one little seed. I'm going to be looking at, how you're doing when the wind comes, and how just so much more. I know I'm speaking in metaphors, but learning is so much more. So I think we have to just be willing to question things, to say, is that really all that it is? Is this really all that this could mean? Is this all that this could be? Sometimes when it comes to traditional subjects, we say, well, you've got to cover this, you've got to cover arithmetic, you've got to cover algebra, you've got to cover calculus, you've got to cover. And one of the ideas I bring out in the book, well, what if we talk about uncovering? What does it mean to uncover a subject rather than cover it, right? Like now you're talking about, okay, well, what else could this possibly include? What else could this possibly mean? How might a mathematician actually look at this versus what it looks like in my textbook? It's just a willingness to ask questions and to let something exist and be more than we think it is. We have to be willing to do that if we're going to adopt these slower practices. I know I've said a lot. Sorry.
No, I was just having so many thoughts while you were talking. My main response to this is, if you're worried about what AI is doing, go get this book, because this is what AI can't do.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Yes.
This is what the robots can't
This is
compete
what the
with
robots
us.
can't do. And then, and you know what? We live in such an information rich age, right? Like knowledge is literally at our fingertips. It's impossible for us to actually know everything. But what the AI cannot do, you're right, Delina, is know things well, know things through a hand-brain connection, connect with things emotionally. There's so much about that, about the human experience when it comes to learning that has not, like AI can't replicate, but we want to act like machines. We want to train our bodies and train our children to respond like machines. And it's like, no, let's do what the machines can't do.
Exactly. This approach is, let's be more human and less machine.
Let's be more human. Yeah. I
Yeah.
like that.
Our culture sends the message that school equals learning equals education. So let's just keep talking about what we misunderstand about learning and education.
Hmm.
I love this quote from the forward in your book. This says, I tried never to let schooling get in the way of his education. And I love
Mm.
that. I think that just, balances the words so they mean what they're
Hmm.
supposed to mean and they're not synonymous. And just tell me how that self-directed learning
Mm.
works
Yeah,
within.
sure. So, the beauty of, I think one of the reasons why I think I made it an entire chapter, self directed learning, the idea of exploring your own interests and
Mhm.
passions, is because parents often see it as very separate from education in general,
Mm,
because they tie education to whatever is being learned in school. And although that's part of education, right? That's part of learning something. We are constantly learning. We're constantly learning new ideas, processing new things, and it actually is both. It includes the ways that we are interacting with different subjects and different curriculum and writing and reading, the skills that we're learning and acquiring, but we're also acquiring and using those skills to access even more information.
mhm,
And when we allow room to be able to, when we allow room for education to also include more and to be also about exploring interests and passions, I feel like it's like an explosion happens, like a bomb goes off, and it's like in a good way.
a happy bomb.
A happy bomb. It just allows learning to be so much more. And you can actually notice more about yourself when it's something that's self directed and something that's related to an interest. Because I think, a lot of times when you're just learning things that you have no connection to, you don't even want to stop and think about some of the ways that you're growing and developing because there's no connection to it. But what I love doing with kids is saying, no, you go ahead and explore this interest. You go ahead and explore this passion. And I'm just going to watch you. I'm going to be here as a mentor, but I'm going to watch you because you're going to learn things about yourself and about this thing that you're exploring that we would have never been able to capture in another context. So, for example, and that doesn't mean that you're going to like and enjoy every topic or idea or thing that your kid wants to explore. But the point is that inside of just about anything, there is learning that can happen. And so, just as a quick example, my daughter, from a very young age, was always interested in these littlest pet shop toys. Okay. Like, I don't know if you can even. I don't even really know how popular they are now, but she would take these toys, she would play with them, but then she got interested in customizing them. And basically that means that you are repainting them or even sculpting parts to add to them and then doing like a complete repaint. I mean, she would take these things and like gouge their eyes out and put new eyes in them. And then like all this, and then who knew that there was like this whole underground underground world of people who were like doing these things. There's like a almost like a Comic-Con, but for Littlest Pet Shop. It's I've learned a lot. Okay. And and although I could look at her and say, like, what are you doing with your time? Like, what did it, like, why do you even want to do this? Me sitting there and watching her from a position of a mentorship, right? Some of the things that I've been able to walk her through, oh my goodness. I'm talking not just like the art of sculpting, okay, and learning about different materials. I mean, she knows about materials for sculpting that I didn't even know existed before she started exploring this, right? So like, how do you hone a craft? How do you develop a skill? And for her, that was sculpting and painting here. So there's that. Then she at different stages in her life would form clubs with a friend groups around this. So how do you maintain a club? How do you lead a
Wow.
club? How do you lead people? How do you communicate with people? How do you make sure everybody feels heard? How do you, like, these are all skills that are going to translate to something else that she wants to do. There was one thing that sort of happened online, which I won't rehash, but I had to mentor her through what is copyright law.
Mm,
And like, so like it's not about the topic. It's never about the topic. It's about the skills you're learning along the way, the development of a person and the things that you are able to realize. And all of these skills, when we really think about it, are things that will translate to the next project that you tackle, to the next thing you want to do, because you take that information with you. You would never be able to I can't say never, but it would be so much more difficult to replicate those things and those little discrete areas of learning if she weren't connected and like highly interested, invested in what we were doing. Do you know what I
Right.
mean? And
Right.
so, yeah, of course, like include the interest, include the passion as part of the learning, because it's a really critical piece of it.
Wow. Do you just let these things organically emerge, the things that they're interested in, and let them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for us in our home, because I knew for us that I wanted to make time for this kind of learning in a very intentional way, what we did from very early on was like say just the same way that people say, "Hey, we're going to do math now." I would say,
Mhm.
"Hey, this is our project time now. Like this is our time when we are all just going to like give to these sorts of, projects and passions." And that has looked different in all different seasons for us.
Mhm.
So sometimes, especially when the kids were younger, it was like, "Hey, here's an hour or 2 hours of the morning where we're just dedicating to this." But that's not the only way that it can exist in a home, especially if you have older children. I'm talking like moving upwards towards 10 and 11, 12, teenagers especially. They've got things that they're interested in, right? There are things that they are interested in doing. So, and a lot of times you'll see those things happening on the weekends or happening late in the evening or happening, and that's all natural and that's all fine. So sometimes it's just about letting them exist wherever and whenever they exist, and then like coming alongside of and making them know that you see it as a critical piece of their learning. Like, and how do you make those things a big deal? Well, you sit with them and you let them talk to you about what it is that you're doing, or you highlight it at the dinner table, or you're like, listen, if you value self-directed learning at the dinner table, "Hey mom, what are you working on? Like, what are you working on right now? What are you doing? What challenges do you have? All right, dad, what about you? What do you got going on, son? What about you?" It's
Yeah.
making it important, So there's different ways to give it a level of intention in your family that makes sense for your family. So I go and I describe what our project times look like in the book, but I am also, I hope is what is clear in the book, is that I say it doesn't have to exist like that in your home.
Mhm.
There are ways to acknowledge self-directed interests, and there are ways to intentionally support it without it necessarily looking like that, and we've explored different ways that it can look. Like there are some times, just because of whatever interest my kids are exploring, they don't need that 1 hour, 2 hour time. So I'm like, okay, cool, let's do some other things. And then there are times when they're like, it'll happen for two kids or it'll happen for all of them. And they're like, "Oh, we really want to explore this." So guess what? For like 2 months, we scrap anything else,
Oh,
any
wow.
other curriculum. And I'm like, let's just go all out. Like we are just willing to play with it. But that's the
Mhm.
beauty of homeschooling, which I
Yeah.
think fear creeps up, and it's scary. That becomes scary for us to just play with a routine like that, to just play with a schedule. We're like, but what
I
about
know.
that's two
Yep.
months of no
What about my
math?
plans?
What about my plans, right? But I promise you, like we are not ruining our children when
Yeah.
we do those kinds of things. I
I think,
promise you.
a side note, I think I was guilty of, like, 2 of them wanna do it and the other one doesn't, and I'm
Hmm.
like, we either all have to agree or you know, because I'm one person.
Because it's so much easier.
This train is moving in this direction. But I love what you said about, the time at the dining room table and your kids are asking you, "What are you getting into?"
Because you
Because
have interests, right?
yes, and I love that because I love this story that you said in the book about, how you homeschooled yourself,
Yes.
with the Florida Highwaymen. Will you tell that story?
Yes, yes, yes. One of my favorite stories to tell. So I'm not even really. Oh, I think I do remember how it started. I was sitting. It was the summertime. I don't remember what summer, but I was sitting at a pool with a few other friends, and all of our kids were just in the water, and we were all just sitting around the pool. And one friend said, "Hey, have you ever heard of the Florida Highwaymen?" And we all started talking. And, some of us had heard of it, others of us know, or some of us knew very little. And so one friend was just sort of sharing whatever she knew at that point. But it sparked some curiosity for me. And although I had heard of them, I realized I didn't know a lot about them. And they were like from my state. I live in Florida. And so what I did was I started researching, and just little by little, I started reading more things about them. And it just got really interested and really weird in a good way, really fast. Because here in Florida, like you'll go into like a bank, and if it's like an older bank and the bank has like older paintings or photos on the wall, oh, lo and behold, that's a Florida Highwayman
Oh,
painting. Like just
wow.
it's
Yeah.
everywhere yet nowhere. Like no, like
Yeah.
not very many people know about it, and then all of a sudden you start realizing it's everywhere. So around the same time, it was the summer, and I love art, and I was just sort of I just sort of said I really want to learn how to do landscape paintings better. And then it was happening simultaneously as my interest in the Florida Highwaymen, who were a group of artists who, I think it was the 50s, 60s, and 70s, they were painting landscapes in Florida and selling their art door to door along highways. That's how they got the name. They didn't get that name until like way later, but they were doing some really interesting things with landscape art, and they each have individual stories about how they started and got started, how they learned art. Some of them knew nothing about art, but because this became a way to make money, you had like some highwaymen coming and saying, well, come here, I'm going to teach you how to slap paint on this Epsom board, and we're going to sell this and we make money. It's like folk art, it's
Wow.
there's a purpose behind it. But um I got really interested, and I started painting outdoors with my children. And because it was an interest of mine, I invited them along. I was like, "You guys want to learn this with me?" They thought it was cool too, so they never really minded. But like it was extra. Like
You were into it.
I was into it. We drove down to Fort Pierce. I had them sitting out in some of the same locations, pulling out our sketch stuff and paint, and like trying to repaint some scenes. We went to the Bacchus Museum down there. We went and did the Florida Heritage Trail, looking at, some of the places where they've been. And then I started to find some of the older generation people who are still alive and still painting, or second generation, their sons and daughters still painting. And we
Wow.
would go and find where they were doing these exhibits, and just like, I'm like, come on, guys, let's go have a chat with them. My kids were like, a chat, huh, Mom? Yeah. I'm like, yes, let's do it. But it was so much fun. And I learned so much about just this topic that I was getting really interested in, but also about myself as I was painting and learning to paint, what I was capable of. I painted in a style that I had never done before. My daughter learned a lot. She's an artist too, so she naturally sort of gravitated toward this as with me, and got so interested in as well, and started painting like better than I did in this same style. And
Oh,
even
wow.
got to sell some of her
Oh,
paintings.
wow.
Met somebody who was actually trained under the Highwaymen, and he actually sold us an art piece that was painted on her birthday that she found. Like we just have such
Oh,
cool stories. It was
wow.
just a really exciting time. It was an exciting summer
Yes.
where I was learning and growing, and I allowed myself
Mhm.
like the freedom and the joy to do it. And I'll tell you what, continuing to homeschool ourselves and continuing to be growing responsive human beings with our own interests and passions helps us to
Mhm.
mentor our children through that same process, because we remember what it feels like. We remember the
Mhm.
emotions, the excitement, the challenges, the frustrations, and we can mentor our children through some of those same things, rather than if we're just disconnected from it, just mom who's sitting there saying, do this, do that, don't do this, don't do that,
Yeah.
while I go wash the dishes, or why, like,
Right.
can we just acknowledge that we all want to be, we all have a right to our own ideas. We all want to live with that level of excitement towards learning. Learning is fun. Learning is actually fun, guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's true, and nothing can it 2 things. One, watching your children have that spark in their eyes, and, seeing their eyes dart back and forth when they're learning something and they're thinking through it, there's nothing like it. But the
Yeah.
other thing is just them watching you do the
Yeah.
same thing. They
Mhm.
want it. They want it.
Yes,
Yeah.
they do. And they also see that becoming an adult is not boring.
Yeah.
And like, because like often, I think as kids, you're looking at adults and you see all the responsibility,
Mhm.
right? Especially, your teenagers are looking at you like, wow, you have to shell out a lot of money, pay for
Yeah.
these groceries, pay these insurance and all this stuff.
Mhm.
It's like responsibility, responsibility, but it's also exciting because you continue to grow and you continue to learn throughout life. I love talking to like 60 and 70-year-olds who are like, what's next? What can I learn? Like,
Mhm.
they are some of the most exciting people to talk to. Do you know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
it's not like there's like some timeline, like, oh, now you're done. You can't grow
Mhm.
anymore.
Like,
No,
I've
like
learned everything
I've
there is
learned
to
everything.
know. I
Yeah.
finished
Like,
the internet.
exactly. Right. Our children need to see that it's a continuation of that.
Mhm.
And it continues to be growth. It continues to be an exciting thing, and learning continues to be an exciting thing. But that's how we create the lifelong learners. We throw out these
Mhm.
cute little terms, but we don't really consider what it means to create one, or what it really means,
Yeah. And that's what's gonna
to practice.
get you, not going, but get you to keep going when
Mm-hmm.
all of this responsibility. It's like you have to keep learning something, you have to keep
Mm-hmm.
making
Yep.
life make sense.
Exactly. Exactly. Mm-hmm.
Finding joy in it, right?
Yeah,
So
for sure.
you used the word becoming a couple minutes ago. Talk about
Mm-hmm.
that, the role of becoming versus
Mm-hmm.
checking boxes and how
Mm.
we're, our role in that, in helping our children become.
Yeah. I think it goes back to the idea of valuing the process over the product, because the role of becoming, it is everything that is involved in that becoming.
Mhm.
And so whenever I think of words like that, like process and becoming, for me, people sometimes misinterpret what I mean, and they think, so you're just after like this rainbow or this idea of perfection. And I'm like, no, process includes all of it. It includes the struggles. It includes the challenge. It includes the joys. It includes the sadder moments. It includes everything. So becoming is like, who am I becoming alongside of these things, in spite of these things, because of these
Mm.
things? It is helping our children to become and to grow and nurture themselves well. I wanted to read this. In chapter 3 of the book, there's somebody who I quote, Mark Prensky, who is an author and speaker known for his ideas about digital citizenship. And so he wrote, the real goal of education and of school is becoming a good person and becoming a more capable person than when you started. Our kids should be asking themselves, who am I becoming? Have I become a better thinker? If so, in what ways? Am I able to do things I couldn't before? What is important to me and why? Can I relate comfortably to individuals, in teams, and in virtual communities? Can I accomplish bigger, more sophisticated projects to add to my portfolio? What kind of person have I had to become to achieve these accomplishments?
Mm.
Can I make the world a better place? And for me, that stands
Mhm.
out so much. What kind of person have I had to become to achieve these accomplishments? Those are the things I want to constantly be
Oh,
talking to my
that is
children
so
about,
good. That is so good.
right? Like, it's
Because
not like,
sometimes we look at people
yeah.
who have achieved so much,
Mm-hmm.
and they have become horrible bosses, horrible
Yes.
people to be around. No one
Mm-hmm.
can stand them, but we
Mm-hmm.
still, put them on a pedestal because they're so wealthy or they're so, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, influential.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Who
Like,
are you
what did
becoming?
who are you becoming? What did I have to pull out of
Yes.
myself to get to that end goal? So it's like, basically, like, let's not only stand and reflect on the process, but as you're walking through that process, one of the things I constantly talk to my kids about as we are looking at our personal projects and self directed work, one of the things that I always say is, what does your work say about you?
Mm.
And it could be little, I mean, 5-year-olds could do this. I remember I was a school teacher and I did a lot of this kind of work in the classroom. And one time I was sitting around the room with very young kids, and one child decided to sew a doll. And we were just sharing the work. And one of the things that I help the kids develop is the ability to speak descriptively, um, to not put down somebody or to speak respectfully. And so one of the things that they looked at this person's doll and said, I notice that you have a lot of thread that's sort of sticking out of places and it's not neatly tucked in. And you know what that child said? She took her doll and she looked at it and she said, I noticed that everybody is saying that my work says that I'm a messy worker and I don't want to be that. So I'm going to do this again. I never sat there and said to her, take the stitches out and do it again. But she realized that she wanted the message that her work was sending to be something different.
Wow.
She was young, guys.
Wow.
Surely we can help 10-year-olds and 11-year-olds and 13-year-olds and 16-year-olds do that same kinds of thinking, right?
Yeah.
About like, what kind of person do I have to become to achieve the things that I am trying to achieve? Like, what level of consistency do I need to put into this? What level of, is it okay that I don't give much attention to this because maybe it is okay, but why is it okay? Maybe I'm trying to put my attention here. Like, you know, I think those are the kinds of conversations that we don't often allow in the learning and the becoming. But I think that they are important.
I love that. I loved all of the self-reflection. Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah. This was not in my notes, but as you were talking, I was thinking about we need to do our own self-reflection because sometimes we see our kids dive deep into something and we immediately say, how can we monetize this? How can you sell that on Etsy?
Exactly.
You know, you almost taking the joy out of just being their creative selves. Or sometimes you see them dive into something and you're already like, okay, she's going to be an actress. Okay,
Exactly.
he's going to be an engineer. Puts his Legos
How
together.
will this
all
define
that.
your future? Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Yes. And I talk about a lot of that in the book too, you know, because those are like natural reactions we have as parents, especially when we're like, you know, we're helping you to become something. Surely this is what you will become because you have this interest, you know? Yeah. Yeah. How to step back and, you know, let go a little bit of that level of control of the things that they choose to do and even who they're choosing to become. That's hard. And I think that's actually one of the hardest things about parenting that most of us don't want to admit is that we can't exactly control as much as we think that we're tasked to, or we think that we should. And we don't always know the outcome. We don't always know the outcome. You know, we're doing all of these things in the hopes that, but we don't always know what it's going to yield. And that's probably one of the hardest things about homeschooling, but honestly, it's parenting.
Yeah. We want to know, or we want to make it happen.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Ooh, parenting is a whole thing. Okay. So, in your book, you also talk about teaching your child and not the curriculum. You gave an example of a history curriculum that you had that was designed for 1 year, but you stretched it out for 3 years. I felt like that was a great example of teaching the child and not the curriculum. But tell me about that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah. I don't actually. It's interesting. I put that in the book because I don't really share that with a lot of people. Because I when I say certain things like that to people, they just look at me like, "Yeah,
what
no,
did
seriously.
you skip if you took 3 years?"
Exactly. Yeah. Like it really. That is definitely a willingness to look at things differently. But you're right. It was a great example of teaching the child, not the curriculum, because a lot of times we look at curriculum and we look at the way it's written and we take that as gospel. You know, like we say, well, this curriculum was written to be 154 days long, or you know, it's a 6-month curriculum or whatever, and so we think we have a duty to make it, you know, begin and end in that time. And so I think that we can use curriculum, sure, but I prefer to use it as a tool to help me with the deeper thinking and learning that I expect to be going on regardless of the curriculum. And so with the history curriculum, I loved the framework that it gave me. It gave me some great topics and it gave me some great, like it organized for me, sort of like a body of knowledge of a particular time in history in a particular country, but it wasn't everything. And it didn't necessarily include the things that we gravitated to and were interested in. So, let's say, we got to this one chapter or one particular time period and, it was talking about different people planning the development of Washington, D.C. I don't know. And we started learning about, and then one kid learned about Benjamin Banneker, but there wasn't enough in this curriculum to even talk about who he was or what he did. Like, okay, well, why? Like, you want to know more about him? Let's go off grid a little bit. Let's go ahead and invite that in and learn about, and what do you know? That leads to something else, and that leads to something else. And it's like when it stops leading to somewhere, it's like, okay, let's go back. Let's go back here. And when you do stuff like that, it's a little scary, but it definitely takes a lot of time. And so, but the things that we were able to do were applicable to us. They were personal to us. The learning was so much more rich. Yeah. It's like, sure. The thing is that we fool ourselves when we think that because you didn't, okay, but you went so deep, on this particular time in history, what about the entire timeline of history? And it's like, okay, so you think that just doing this cursory run through it all, if I ask you in 3 years to tell me everything on that timeline, do you really believe you'll be able to do it with accuracy? Do you really believe that you will be able to talk about it in any sort of meaningful way? Just because you covered it and read it and got through it quickly and did all the activities and watched all the videos? Probably not, so let's use that curriculum as a tool. It's a great tool. It organized a lot. It gave me a lot of great resources, but it's not all there is for this body of knowledge, right? So I can incorporate other tools and, and then there are times when, we can just move through it more quickly because maybe that connection or that vibrant interest just isn't there, and that's okay too. So yeah, this curriculum stretched out over 3 years.
No, and I think that it's an opportunity for self-reflection for the parent that's doing, that has a curriculum, because you think that if you do it exactly like this, then what does it say about me that I finished it when it was supposed to be finished, And so you have to take a step back and be like, doesn't actually say anything about you. There's no prize at the end for doing this.
No prize, but some of it is like personality type.
Yeah.
Because some personality types, it's like you just get that joy and satisfaction of just checking off that box and saying, yes, I completed a task. I did it. And I get that. I really, really do. But what is taught is not always equal to what is learned. And so we need to also realize that, in the book, I brought up this example back in was it the 90s, 80s? No, I think it was 90s. Or no, it was probably the 2000s, the early 2000s. That show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader?
Right.
What was so funny about that show was all the adults who failed miserably, because they could not remember like grade school curricular content. And it's like, well, that's kind of, I felt like that was exactly the point, right? Like
maybe not the point they were trying to make. Yeah.
Right.
But yep, perfect example.
Yeah.
How you're not going to remember this stuff later.
Exactly.
And it's okay.
It's okay.
So have you, Leslie, ever felt the pressure of joining the pace of the culture? And how did you resist that if you did feel that pressure?
I have many, many conversations throughout the day and throughout the week in my head. Some of the things that I have intentionally tried to do, there are some things, yes, that may become more easily to me than somebody else, but it doesn't mean that I am not bombarded by fearful thoughts, or it doesn't mean that I sometimes second guess what I'm doing or question. I have some children with some very real learning differences, including dyslexia, dyscalculia. And so you constantly asking questions like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing? Am I doing my child a disservice? Am I like, what's the right move here? Yes, I have all those kinds of thoughts, but some of the things that I've really had to do was to slow down, step back, and be descriptive about and reflective about my experience and what I'm seeing and noticing in the children. But I have also had to be really clear about what my values are. And by really clear, basically that means spell them out, say them, reflect on them, notice when they change, and keep that at the forefront, because those are the things that keep me going. everybody has the negative fears and thoughts and the questions, but it's keeping those values at the forefront, even in terms of I highly value, you always hear this expression, but for me, it's like reality, connection over curriculum. For me, that is a high value. When I sit down and do math with a kid, I want us to both get up from that experience not angry with each other. And so I have to behave differently in those moments. I can't control anything they do, but I can control me. And so sometimes that means scrapping my plans for the day. Sometimes it means shortening my plans for the day, being responsive to the human being in front of me. The other day, my son got up, which is not always the case. He got up, and after I sat down and I was working on some math with him, and he said, I love you, mommy. And I was so happy. Like, that was his response when we closed the book. And then I looked at him and I said, I love you more than math. And he was like, I love you more than math too. But that's a high value for me. And so there are choices that I'm going to have to make when I'm math is just one example. There are choices that I'm going to have to make when I'm doing math to align my life with that value, to align my time with that value. So for me, that's the thing that keeps me honest, keeps me true to what I'm doing, and allows me to keep going and making the choices I'm making. It doesn't mean that I don't have those thoughts, but like, allow them to exist.
Yeah.
But reflect on them and evaluate what they mean for your life, about where that idea is even coming from. Like, do the personal work, the inner work that you need to do to be able to overcome those things, because every feeling is coming from an idea, and every idea, like all of those things are coming from somewhere. So just as easily as it is to focus on that idea, we can put our focus elsewhere and then have different feelings,
Yeah. This is like homeschool mom therapy. I appreciate this therapy session. No joke. Seriously, when I read this book, I felt two things: nostalgic for our homeschool life that we had when the kids were younger. And then I wanted to go snatch them right out of their high schools. And like, no, we're not doing this pace no more. I don't care what anybody says. I don't care about nothing. I don't even care what y'all say. That's what I felt like. But I messaged you in that moment. I was like, I'm snatching them out today. And but you said that you can still incorporate some of the important parts no matter where they're in school. So, asking for a friend, of course.
Of course.
Tell me how families who don't homeschool can incorporate more slow in their lives.
Yeah. That is actually one response to this book that I have been really excited and delighted by, is the people who say that this to them is, yes, about education, yes, about learning, but is so much more about parenting. Because I think that, other ideas in the book about the idea of slow, it's about less consumption and instant gratification and more gratitude. And ways to give. And those are things that you can think about as a family, no matter where education is happening. You can slow down moments of learning that you feel are going by way too fast for your own child in that setting at home, by being intentional, by saying, no, I care about your well-being. I care about your interest still. Like, let's explore an interest and pursue an interest. Who says that can't happen on a weekend? Or who says that can't happen after school? Or, I was a school teacher, and as a school, it was a very non-traditional setting. So I didn't believe in homework, so I didn't give it. But, other teachers did. But I love those conversations where the parent would be like, I don't want to do this. I don't want to. I'm like, okay, why? Because they had other valuable ways to spend their time. Great. Great. I just, or even, maybe that's not you. Maybe you do have to do the homework. Then you know what? Slow down. Sit next to you. Slow down. Stop vacuuming. Stop doing laundry. Go sit down. Get in the same physical space with your child. Struggle with them. Let me try one of those problems. Just sit next to them, shoulder to shoulder, and do that. Or talk about, hey, what books are you reading now in that class? Any of them really like? Yeah, Mom, I really like this one. Go for a drive. especially older kids, they love somebody I love the way they described it as like parallel facing activities. It's like they
Mm.
get nervous when you do the eye
Mm-hmm.
contact, but it's like you're driving and they're in the
Mm-hmm.
car, you're both facing the same direction, but you just have this great conversation
Mm-hmm.
about some book that they really love. Hey, that reminds me of this book that I read. Like, have a real conversation. One of the things I talk about in the book is the art of conversation. As parents, we sometimes fire off questions to our kids and call that conversation.
Mm.
Conversation is give and take. How do you have a conversation with your friend? Have a
Mm-hmm.
conversation like that with your child. Like, no matter what age they are, like, these are all things that can be happening no matter where your child does school. You can slow down. You can be more intentional. You can do things that fill you up as a family. You can do things
Yeah.
that are against the grain or the pace of life. Go ahead and go out on a hike, go out on a walk, go to a park. I like to take walks and I call them different things. I say to my kids, let's take a thinking walk or let's take a noticing walk. And we are like
Mm-hmm.
literally just, it could be a city street and we are just walking down
Mm-hmm.
noticing things like, oh my gosh, did you ever see that on top of
Mm-hmm.
that building? That's such a nice, slow activity,
Yeah.
or let's a thinking walk. Like, like you're not really
Like,
noticing much around you because you're like deep in thought over about
like
something. Let's
everybody be quiet.
yeah, one time I discovered that we actually liked doing this back in 2020. It was weird, but not weird anymore. We went out on a walk. We had to walk the dog, and I put on an audiobook on my phone as we were going. And it was like we were like, it's like, let's go walk and listen to an audiobook. Like, I don't know, we put those two things together, but we actually discovered that we loved it. It helped us to just
Slow down. Yeah.
slow down, take a class together, explore
Yeah.
an interest together. There's so many ideas. There's so many ways that this could live and breathe no matter where education is happening. That's just a piece of it. We're
Mm-hmm.
all responsible for our children's education in many ways, no matter where school is happening.
Mm-hmm. I
Yeah.
love that. I love that. Thank you so much, Leslie, for just sharing all your wisdom with us.
Mhm.
And y'all pick up the book. It is wherever you buy your books, that's where you'll find it. And I'll also have a link to it on the show notes. But
Mm.
Leslie, will you also tell us because I love your Instagram too. So tell us where to find you on social media.
Sure. On social media, I am most active on Instagram, and you can find me at Leslie M. Martino. You have to stick that M in there for Instagram. But you can find my website at lesliemartino.com. You could see my blog there, sign up for my newsletter, all the stuff.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Delina. I enjoyed this.
I can't say enough good things about Leslie and her book. Find links to her book and her social media on our website, wokehomeschooling.com/podcast. I encourage you to grab her book and see how you can take some of the principles in there to enrich your child's learning life and even to find new ways to homeschool yourself. Until next time, go unlearn something today.
Homeschool Yourself is a production of Woke Homeschooling, Inc. For show notes and links to things mentioned in the episode, visit wokehomeschooling.com/podcast. Woke Homeschooling empowers parents to teach their kids an inclusive, truthful history. We invite you to visit our website and download a sample of the history curriculum we offer for kids. Visit us at wokehomeschooling.com.